Welcome back to Niners Nightly on this Friday. Larry Krueger with you, and with us on the UMA guest line, the great John Dickinson, boots on the ground. JD, thanks for a few minutes, and we're getting ready, of course, to listen to you and Adam on Sunday morning leading into Niners-Cardinals, the finale of the regular season, and obviously this has not been a successful year for the 49ers. I asked Kyle Shanahan today, I said, Kyle, how involved are you in the offseason personnel? Would you like to be more involved, less involved, equally involved? And he said he likes his involvement and doesn't want to ramp it up or ramp it down. What do you think? Ultimately, this is a huge offseason for the 49ers. Where do you start after a season like this?
Yeah, it is a huge offseason, Larry. I think, I think Kyle, I'll just touch on him first. I think from his standpoint, more than being more or less involved in personnel, I think it's really more him taking a little bit of a step back and evaluating some of the CEO type stuff as far as his head coaching on a game in, game out basis. Like, I feel like he needs to take a step back and a deep breath and just try to look at just philosophically, whether it's, how aggressive he is or how much he values special teams, the complementary football components of things, game day responsibilities, those types of things. I'm not saying by any means he should give up play calling or anything like that. Obviously, he's not going to do that. But to me, as far as Kyle goes, I think, and I heard John Lynch on our air this morning with the morning game, basically saying that he thinks this is a real good opportunity to reset, to do a little mini reset, but get right back, on the path that the 49ers had been on these last couple of years. And I would agree with that, but I think you got to take a hard look. It's funny, I was with all the Jimmy Butler news, right, and the Heat coming out and suspending him, and he demanding a trade. Now, I went back and listened to Pat Riley's post-mortem of the Heat season when they got eliminated in the playoffs. And Pat Riley, the legendary coach and GM and, been around 40 years. And, he said, hey, when you get beat, you got to take a step back, whether you're a coach or you're a GM, and you have to do a deep dive at what works and what doesn't. And it's not as simple as, hey, we were 5th in offense and 20th in defense. It's well, what were you in deflections? And what were you in, when you ran this play? And, there are certain things that maybe you didn't do well to where your overall ranking wasn't totally impacted by the fact that you didn't do that specific thing well. And so I think it's that detailed, targeted approach that Kyle Shanahan needs to have really in all phases of his own decision-making and just the way that this team is organized and put together. I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think if this team truly is going to get back to where they were, we can talk personnel and players, and it obviously always comes down to talent, but I think the little details as far as the day-to-day operation that wins and loses you games on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays, I think those are the things that Kyle specifically has to, he can do it on the beach somewhere, unplug, and then just kind of really do a hard look when he comes back at all of those things that help you win games.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and we'll find out, they say the best personnel people have a relative coldness about them. And yet Lynch and Shanahan seem relatively warm people by comparison, I kind of think.
But you know what? When you lose the way that the Niners did and have a year like this, and injuries part of it, there are a million different reasons why. I think when you have a year like this, it's easier to make the cold move where you think you have to make it because you were unsuccessful. Like, it may sting, but to me it stings a lot more if you're coming off a Super Bowl loss or an NFC Championship game loss to maybe say goodbye to somebody that you really love and has produced a lot for you. I think when you have a year like the Niners are going to have 6 or 7 wins, I think it's a little bit easier to be a little bit more cold because nobody can be happy with what the end result was.
Well, let's get right into it then. I'm standing at his locker today, and Kyle Juszczyk's like, I want to play multiple years, man. I think I can play, I think he said 3 or 4 more years. The 49ers are one of only a handful of teams in the NFL that employ a fullback, and yet the Niners can't run worth a damn in the low red zone to save their life. Kyle Shanahan 2 games ago passed the ball on 2nd and goal from the 4, passed the ball again on 3rd and goal from the 4, and then kicked a field goal on 4th and goal from the 4. I mean, that's low red zone. That's premium run the ball. And they obviously, I think he's coaching around the weaknesses in his football team. I don't think it's even about a philosophy. I just think he knows that the interior lineman can't blow anybody off the ball, and he doesn't have the backs to punch it in there. Otherwise, why are the Niners not running in the low red zone? What do you do with Juice? I mean, he wants to be here, and he's got a lot of pride, and he's had some great pasts. But I mean,
he took a pay cut already,
and he's a Pro Bowler. I mean, you have a Pro Bowl. Think about this: the 49ers have a Pro Bowl fullback and cannot run the ball on the goal line or in the short yardage. Make that make sense.
I think Juice is gone. I think, unless maybe he's asked to take another pay cut and would be willing to do it. And he was pretty open, Larry, in saying that he really had to think about it. And as much as he wanted to be around, it was an ego hit that the 49ers basically went to him and said, we need you to do this or we're going to have to move in another direction. To me, that's one step away from being closer to the end of the line. I think he has to be much more involved in what the 49ers do, or it's time to move on and bring somebody else in that maybe can help you be a little bit more efficient. Because the way you score in the red zone, especially the low red zone as you're talking about, the way you score there is by running it in. The way you score in there is by being a smash mouth team and a team that you know, opposing defenses have to sell out against, and then you can go play action and stuff's wide open, you know, off the play action in the end zone. It just frees everything up. So I think he's somebody that if he's going to be around again, he's got to be more involved. They got to throw it to him. He's got to be impactful in the running game. He's got to be the chess piece that he had been for a good portion of his time with San Francisco. If not, I think he's one of the difficult decisions to where maybe you look to move in a different direction.
How about Debo? Where are you with Debo? And we all know Shanahan loves Debo. He's one of his personal favorites. They redid his contract to some degree, so I've heard people suggest there's not a big, huge advantage cap-wise in cutting him. They also are not going to have Ayuk, you know, probably for the first half of the year, maybe for more. So what do you have at receiver? You got Jennings, and you got Pearsall and Cowing, and if you don't have Debo and you don't have Ayuk, I mean, that's now suddenly in a year where you need to upgrade the O-line and D-line and linebacking core, now you may have to go draft a receiver pretty high too.
Yeah, and I think Debo, to me, Debo would be gone. But again, as you mentioned, and it has been reported, and really, you know, depending upon who you talk to, it really seems like the 49ers are intent on bringing him back. Like they're intent on, because there is not a big savings to be had by moving off of him. And I think, you know, if they felt that he had some trade value, maybe they would look to move him. Remember, they did that a little bit in this past offseason. And, you know, depending upon who you believe, there was the deal potentially in place. It all didn't end up going down. But I think he ends up back. I think Kyle Shanahan is going to hope for a bounce back kind of a year next year from Debo, and they're going to need him, honestly, for all the reasons that you mentioned. But that would be another one. If the contract was a little bit different, I would freshen things up a little bit. I think there needs to be. Here's the other part of why I guess he would probably be back too. He would be an immediate candidate to go somewhere else, maybe even within the division, and be ticked off Debo against you, you know, maybe a couple of times. So I think that's something that maybe you don't want to combat with. That's never a reason not to get rid of somebody if you think their time is done. But I get the impression he's going to be back. But that would be one where I would almost be looking for. I would be looking to maybe find somebody else, whether it's draft or free agency. You know, somebody off of another team's roster that maybe you could buy low on, that is underutilized by the current team that he's on, or you know, maybe a mid-round type of a draft pick where you can find somebody that you can, you know, that can do some of those things, right? You know, more of that hybrid running back receiver kind of a guy. To me, that's the kind of guy where you're more apt to be able to find a lower risk draft pick, right? Like you're not looking for the prototypical X receiver that runs perfect routes and is going to get open in space and all of those things. Like you can I think use that mid-round type pick to take a flyer on a guy that has a unique and specific skill set that maybe fits the Debo mold. So that's where I would go. I would look to maybe move off of Debo, but the impression I get is that the 49ers are not, because of the contract situation, going to necessarily look to do it.
Tim Ryan made it sound to Papa the other day like maybe the Brock's deal doesn't get done this offseason, that maybe they'll put it on hold. What do you think of that? I mean, that's the first I'd heard of that. I mean, It seemed like the Niners came out and said they wanted to get this thing done. That makes me wonder if there's already been some numbers exchanged and the numbers don't jive, or at least they're not on the same page. What do you? What do you think?
Well, I would want to get a deal done. I mean, flat out. If I'm the 49ers, I would want to get a deal done. If I'm Brock Purdy, I'd want to get a deal done. But the way that this thing gets weird to where the 49ers maybe say to him, all right, we're going to let you play it out, is if there is a gap. Like I've said this for a couple of months. I do not think Brock Purdy is in the discount-taking business. I think his ask is going to be large. I think it's going to be large enough to make people uncomfortable. And I think this everything to me, based on his struggles recently, not having the year that he had this year, that he had last year, and even in 2022, I think when you look at it, Larry, his ask is still going to be high based on everything that he's brought to the table and the wins and all of that. And so I think if Niners are comfortable with the number, it has the potential to get ugly. Like that's the one thing I've said and said a bunch. And so, maybe they're setting the table for that here. But I just don't think it's going to be seamless like everybody does it. Brock's just going to be cool taking this discount and doing it for the team. And he's already taken a discount here for these last couple of years. And I get it. That's the debate. He doesn't feel, hey, you were picked last. You got paid accordingly. It sucks for you. That doesn't mean you get back pay, right? Like that, there's a very hard line, thought to that. But that doesn't mean that the agent and the player aren't going to ask for it. And so I anticipate them asking for it, and I think their number is going to be closer to the $60 million per year that I think a lot of people thought is gone. And I think if the Niners truly are more like, yeah, we think that should be in the low 40s, then there is going to be a significant enough gap to where it gets contentious. And if it gets contentious, that's where ultimately the 49ers may have to play the card of, all right, well, we're going to bring in this backup that we think probably can start, and we're going to let you play out the final year your deal. And if you go out and ball out, then we'll pay you accordingly, but we're going to make you prove it one more time.
3 names before we get out of here. Talanoa Hufanga. What do you think? He's a free agent. A lot of people thought they were bringing him back, but, man, he's taking some bad angles, and I don't know what he's going to cost. What do you think? Is Hufanga back?
I think the Niners want him back. I don't think that – I think they want him back at the right price. I think there's a number where if another team really makes him an offer, I think, the 49ers maybe wouldn't necessarily match or beat that offer. They got to figure it out between him and Malik Mustafa. I think, the best combination of safeties on the 49ers roster this year were Mustafa and Hufanga. But again, as you've said so many times, they're very similar. And so, do you need to, Mustafa is the one guy who I think is going to be around, obviously, for sure. Jair Brown's out of favor now. Hufanga came back. So that's an area where I wouldn't think that the 49ers would be looking to overpay if they had the opportunity maybe to spend that money on somebody that's more complementary to Mustafa and somebody that can be a little bit better in terms of pass coverage. I think that's a balance issue on the 49ers defense that they need. They got to improve their tackling across the board. I mean, you mentioned tackling. They got to improve tackling across the board. So I think they'd like to keep Hufanga, but again, I think the price is going to have to be right. Otherwise, you look and maybe go get somebody that's more complimentary to Mustafa.
Javon Hargrave, is he coming back? What do you think? Mayoko is stating that maybe they're going to move on from Javon Hargrave. I think they probably will.
I feel like he's gone. That's kind of a short and sweet. Yeah, I feel like he's gone. I think the expenditure for him is something where they're going to have to reallocate that money. I mean, don't get me wrong; they need defensive tackles. They need multiple defensive tackles. They probably need 3 defensive tackles in this offseason between a free agent and probably a couple of draft picks to be perfectly honest. And Hargrave was already had a big number. I think when he was out there, he performed at times. There were other times he was a little bit underwhelming. And then he's also somebody that's getting up there in terms of age. And so, yeah, I think he's gone.
How about Dre Greenlaw? That's going to be a big one to me. I mean, I would extend for Dre Greenlaw. I realize they're hugged up against the cap with Brock and the whole deal. But to me, man, this is a guy you just got to have.
I'm bringing him back, and I'm doing everything I can to bring him back as soon as possible. Does it have to be a 1-year deal? I guess it probably does, considering the fact that he was a little banged up immediately, even upon returning. But I would be willing for the 1 year to give Dre a little bit more than maybe the market might dictate for the 1 year. And then if he proves over the course of 2025 that he can stay healthy, then I'd look to throughout the year maybe do an extension and keep him a part of this thing if he proves he can be healthy. I want Dre Greenlaw. He is, you talk about tone setters and physical forces, and even if he isn't quite the guy that he used to be, I think he's still somebody, along with Fred Warner, that sets the mood for just the baseline intensity level for your whole defense. So I want him around. That being said, I think the 49ers have to get another linebacker into the fold. They have to find another guy, and maybe Winters is part of that. I know you've been higher on Winters than I've been. I think he's come on and played better in the second half of the season when given opportunities. I still think he's a little bit too much of a wild card. I would keep him in the mix, and then I would look to add somebody else to that mix that's of the Greenlaw-Warner mold, not necessarily in terms of talent. I mean, you hope if it's a draft pick that they can be obviously that level of talent, but to me it's somebody that plays with the physicality and the speed that those two have. Like, to me, you want to find somebody that's next in that mix.
JD, we have only literally 60 seconds left, so you're going to have to give me a 60-second answer on this one. But right, I'm getting rumblings that Mike Dunleavy and Buster Posey both could be getting ready for trades. Who do you think's more likely to make the big trade first, Buster or Dunleavy?
Buster. Only by the calendar. Dunleavy's got till February 6th. I don't think Buster has that quite that long. I think they're a little. I think that the time has come for Buster to kind of make the move. Although with the Jimmy Butler suspension, I mean, maybe things are starting to speed up on that front. He's going to miss the next 7 games. That gives the Heat about 2 weeks to figure it out whether they're going to ship him somewhere. And the Warriors definitely should be in that mix, Larry.
Yep, I know you're a big fan of that one. JD, awesome stuff, man. Happy New Year. Awesome rapping with you as usual, my friend. We'll do it again soon.
Sounds good, Larry. Thank you.
We'll see you Sunday. Of course, JD and Copes will be on the pregame and postgame. I'll join them for a segment on both. All right, we're coming up next. We will come back, our final timeout. We'll come back and put a bow on this one and hand it off on the Sports Leader.